In this episode, we look at the case of two young Pakistani couples who crossed the Rann of Kutch, allegedly for love. We also talk about 5 Jharkhand workers who are set to return home after being stranded in Cameroon for months. But we begin today with Sanchar Saathi, the government-developed cybersecurity app that has raised serious concerns about privacy and consent. Hi, I'm Ichha Sharma, and you're listening to 3 Things, the Indian Express news show. It was last week that the centre had asked smartphone companies in India to pre-install the state-developed app Sanchar Saathi, which allows users to report fraudulent calls and messages and to file complaints about stolen mobile phones. The Department of Telecommunications had directed manufacturers to ensure that all new devices come with Sanchar Saathi pre-installed and that a software update be issued for phones already in use so the app could be added to them. But after widespread criticism and concerns over privacy, the government revoked the order yesterday and also said that the app cannot be used for snooping. Here's Telecom Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia speaking about it in Parliament.
हमारा कोई हट नहीं, इसकी सफलता का प्रयोग जनता के आधार पर हुआ है। फीडबैक हमें मिलेगा, उस फीडबैक के आधार पर अगर उस ऑर्डर में भी हम लोगों को कोई चेंज लाना है, उसके लिए भी हम लोग तैयार हैं। ये मैं अवश्य कहना चाहता हूं कि इस ऐप के आधार पर न स्नूपिंग संभव है, न स्नूपिंग होगा। प्रधानमंत्री
Now, to understand this application in detail and why it set off alarm bells, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks to the Indian Express's Soumyarendra Barik.
Soumyarendra, for those who might not have even seen the app, tell us what exactly does it do? What is it meant for?
So, as Indians have become more and more online, as Indians have become more and more internet pro citizens, along with it, the problem that has come is this problem which we all face, right? Like you get a lot of scam calls, you get a lot of spam calls. There's a lot of fraud that, of course, happens online. Many people have fallen prey to it.
And they're getting more and more sophisticated.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. You see newer and newer modes, something like a digital arrest, for instance. That's a very new iteration of an online scam, for instance, right? So, of course, the scammers are becoming much more sophisticated. The means are becoming a lot more cutting edge. And of course, on the other side, you also have this big market of like stolen phones, right? A black market of stolen phones. Phone theft is, again, very common in India. So seeing this problem, the government made this portal, which started off life as a web portal called the Sanchar Saathi, right? Now, what the portal essentially allows you to do is that you go on it, you register with your current number that you're using right now. And once you're in it, what you can see is, you can put in the number. You can see that how many different connections are there under your name. So that's a good thing. People can get to know about it. You can put in a phone's IMEI number. An IMEI number is basically your phone's identifier. So you can put in that 15-digit IMEI code to check the authenticity, the genuineness of a device. When you receive a spam or a scam call or a message or even a message on WhatsApp of that nature, you can go and report that particular message on this portal, right? So that's how this portal started off in life as.
And so after I put that report in the portal, what will it do with that information?
So basically what that portal will do is that, so say if you lose your phone, what you at the GetSet can do is that, you can go, you can put in the 15-digit IMEI, your mobile number, etc. there, and you can essentially immediately block that device, right? So once you block that device, one would hope that even if it finds its way into the black market, it simply be useless, right? Like someone else won't be able to use it essentially. So that is the number one thing that you can do with it. You can also immediately generate lost complaints on it, etc., which get shared with the law enforcement agencies and all. So you don't have to rush to a police station to file a complaint that I've lost my phone and things like that. You can do that from within the portal itself. So that is its key sort of promise, right? And again, you can potentially block some of these scam and spam communication that very frequently and routinely comes to you, right? Now, this started off life as a portal, but of course, we have this fascination of making an app for everything. So in January this year, the Department of Telecommunications, basically, I think working with their other subsidiary, which is called the C-Dot, they developed this app called the Sanchar Saathi application. Basically with the same functionalities, but just in an application format, which you can now download from a Play Store on your Apple device or a Play Store on your Google device, right? So that's how this app exists today.
Okay, so all good intentions. It clearly seems like something that the government has developed to help people. And yet, it has made headlines for all the wrong reasons. And this is because of this particular directive which was issued by the government last week. Talk about what exactly this directive said.
So on November 28th, the government sent out an order. This order was basically passed. The legal backing for this order was this piece of legislation called the Telecommunication Cybersecurity Amendment Rules 2025. These rules were amended in October, notified in October essentially, right? So under this particular legislation, on November 28th, the government sent out a directive to a bunch of smartphone companies, Apple, Samsung, Xiaomi, Google, and other players, basically telling them that, this phone theft is a big menace. It endangers India's telecom cybersecurity, and we have to do something about it. Now, the government's directive in that particular order was that within 90 days, within 3 months, what these companies have to do is that for every new phone that they sell in the market, phones which haven't been sold yet, they should all come with this Sanchar Saathi app pre-installed on them, right? For every phone that has already been sold, so phones that you and I are using at this point in time, those phones should immediately within 90 days receive a software update. And once that software update is complete, you should be able to see the Sanchar Saathi app already installed on your phone. In the same order, the government also said that these manufacturers cannot disable or restrict, these are important terms, cannot disable or restrict the functionalities of this app. And they have to now send a compliance report to the government within 120 days. So basically, in effect, what this government does is that it has now told smartphone companies which manufacture in India or which import their phones that this app is now a mandated app on every single smartphone. There is a retrospective application of this particular order because it also applies to phones which have already been sold in the market, that they should now come mandatorily with this Sanchar Saathi app pre-installed.
Right, and this caused quite a bit of uproar, especially from privacy rights activists. Tell us about some of the issues that were immediately flagged.
So, this defeats many things. Number one, it defeats the most basic tenet of privacy protection, that is consent. I, as a smartphone user, should be able to consent, should be able to have the choice of whether I want to use Sanchar Saathi app or not. If an app is already present on your phone, you can surely maybe at a later stage choose not to have it anymore on your phone. But why is the app there on your phone to begin with, right? And also, let's be very honest. Let's look at some of the history that's happened in India. You have these allegations about the government using the Israeli software Pegasus to track people in the civil society, to track journalists, to track even opposition politicians and even politicians from their own party, right? You've had all these allegations. So I think there is that inherent fear within people that if it is a government mandated app that's already present on your phones, I think there is always that inherent fear that what if it's not as innocent as it seems? What if this app is not just an app where you can track or report your lost phone, where you can just report a fraudulent communication, etc.? What if in the future, it doesn't have to happen tomorrow, it doesn't have to happen 2-3 years down the line, it can happen at any point in time. In cybersecurity privacy parlance, we have this phrase called function creep. A function creep is basically, when an application that you have, it starts doing something which is far beyond its original intended objective or purpose, right? And I think people are always wary about these things, and as one should rightly be as well.
Right, and it particularly raised concerns because it made people wonder that, if the government can install this app in my phone, what else can it install? And it is after all this backlash that the government then issued a clarification before completely going back on its order. Can you tell us what this clarification was?
Okay, how previously I spoke about two very important phrases in that particular November 28th order about how manufacturers were not allowed to quote unquote disable or restrict the functions of this particular app. For anyone with either a legal understanding or, to be honest, without any legal understanding, it was very clear that that particular statement meant that you cannot delete the app, right? Because how can you delete an app without disabling its functions, without restricting its functions? The two can't happen mutually exclusively. If one happens, the other will automatically happen, right? So that was like a double whammy on everything that privacy practitioners and every single privacy principle that's been internationally recognized as a standard. Do you not have a choice at the moment that app lands up on your phone? But at a later stage also, you don't even have the choice or the option to remove it from your phone, right? So I think seeing that particular point was creating probably the biggest amount of friction. the minister, telecom minister Jyotiraditta Scindia, he clarified that, people would be able to delete the application. They were free to not register for it. The app would merely appear on their phones. After that, they still have the choice about whether they want to register for it, whether they want to continue using it, or never even open it and just simply delete it immediately.
Right, and before this order was rolled back, this directive, of course, also got pushback from smartphone companies. Tell us how they reacted to it.
So, I spoke to a lot of people in the industry yesterday on December 2nd, and it was very, very clear that, Apple and Google was simply not going to comply with this. Because you don't know, an app can be billed as something today, but tomorrow it can turn out to be something completely different. So there is always that concern about function creep. And also, some of their own internal policies. Like, let's take the example of Apple, for instance, right? Apple does not even pre-install all its own apps on their iPhones, right? And Apple has this very strict policy of not pre-installing any third-party application on their phone. That's why when you buy a new iPhone, for instance, you will almost never find any bloatware on the phone, right? Bloatware is basically applications that are just there, which, people would never use it, but they are there for either for marketing or for other purposes, right? Because someone has paid money for their app to be on everyone's phone, etc. And also, they're also afraid that, say, okay, now the software update would have to go out for every iPhone or for every Android device. A software update is not like an iOS for India, an Android for India. These are global software, right? These are global platforms. The iOS version that I'm using in India at this point in time is the same iOS version that another iPhone user is using in the United States, is the same iOS version that someone is using in Europe, right? Is the same iOS version that someone's probably using in other countries as well, right?
So in order to comply with this directive, they would have had to make a different standard for India.
That is the biggest concern, right? There will be a customized iOS now for India, which will have this Sanchar Saathi app pre-installed. So this is going a level above. It is asking for a policy change at a deep software level, where that software change has to happen, where it is the most intimately linked to your hardware, which is the operating system. And that is not something that you can ship jurisdiction-wise. That is not something that you can ship country-wise. You will then reach a point where an Indian iPhone looks different from an American iPhone. No country in the world is ever going to accept that, right? And also, what happens is, once you give someone a bit of a leeway, where does it stop, right? That concern is very real and it always exists.
And now, of course, they won't have to do it. But has the government given such a directive before?
So the government, at least in India, has asked such a thing from companies where, the mandate is so strong that every single device would have to have the Sanchar Saathi application pre-installed. So this simply has no precedent. There has been some push from the government side in the past. Say, for instance, during the coronavirus pandemic, when this app called the Arogya Setu, the contact tracing app, was developed in collaboration with the government and the private sector, there was some insistence that, all private employees and all public sector employees should have this app and things like that. But even there, you later had court cases where I think the Karnataka High Court one point in time had said that, you can't discriminate against a person simply because they don't want to have the Arogya Setu app, right? So there has been no precedent of this fundamental mandate that, every phone needs to have this and a directive sent to manufacturers. That has never happened. In Arogya Setu's case, for instance, it did happen that the government had asked employees, private and public, to have this app. And I think many companies individually from their own, and I remember Zomato and Swiggy, for instance, they had directed all their delivery workers, because they were the last touch point with customers, to mandatorily have this app on their phones. And I think when a delivery was coming to your place, you could see, that so-and-so delivery person has the Arogya Setu app installed on their phones and all. So it was some companies abided by it, some didn't abide by it, and it was okay because it was not a legally backed mandate.
Right, and although this order has now been revoked, people can still, of course, download the app, right? So can you tell us a bit about Sanchar Saathi's privacy policy and how does it compare to other apps out there?
So, I think the one thing that we have to first establish is that when you go on the Google Play Store and on the Apple App Store, there is a section underneath every app which basically shows what kinds of data that particular app collects. Now, that is a voluntary declaration. If I have developed an app which is currently live on these app stores, I will have to declare that, okay, I collect your names, I collect your emails, I collect your phone numbers, this is how I process them and things like that. If you go to Sanchar Saathi's page on both these app stores, on the data collection part of it, they say that we don't collect any data. That is simply not true.
Yeah, I'm on their page right now and it says no data collected. The developer says that this app doesn't collect user data.
That is simply false. The only way to access Sanchar Saathi's features, the features that he spoke about before, is that you have to mandatorily register for it with your mobile number. Your mobile number is, again, one of the most common but also one of the most important types of personal data, right? It's linked to you. It's linked to a government ID of yours. If someone has your number, there is a way that that number can be tracked back to who you are, right? It reveals your identity. So your phone number is one of the most important types of personal data that you own, right? So to use every single feature in the app, this registration is mandatory. So the first window when you open the app asks for your phone number and then basically registers you for it, right? So registration with the phone number is mandatory, and also on Android devices. So what happens is that, when you put in your phone number on an Apple device, for instance, on an iPhone, you put in a number, then you say that, send message for registration or whatever, something like that. And then like a SMS window pops up where you have to then press send to that message, and then that message gets sent, and then whatever, like the verification process happens, and then you're registered. On Android devices, you don't even have to send that message. That message is sent automatically. The moment you open it, it detects the mobile number and it sends that message automatically. So you're automatically registered on Sanchar Saathi the moment you open it, right? So that is a big, big red flag. Then you come to the application's privacy policy, which is a very short privacy policy, right? Now it's lacking some crucial elements that are usually considered the industry standard for privacy. For instance, it has no explicit statement about, what rights a user has while using the app. It does not allow users to request a correction of their data, but also more importantly, deletion of their data. It has no opt-out mechanism. It's not like you once shared your data and then can later go and delete that. The privacy policy simply does not account for it. And based on the privacy policy, it is very unclear for how long this data is stored on this app, right? So these are some elements which are otherwise, the industry standard. They are considered as crucial elements in any privacy policy. Some of these things are missing from the privacy policy.
And next, we take a look at two young couples who crossed the Rann of Kutch on foot from Pakistan, saying they did it for love. Both their journeys happened on full moon nights, 45 days apart. Each couple stepped into the salt desert carrying almost nothing. Toto and Meena had a few rotis, some jaggery, and a bottle of water, while Popat and Gauri carried only a single Pakistani 100-rupee note. When we spoke to the Indian Express's Brendan Dabhi, he told us both couples said they were in love, but their families were not willing to accept their relationship.
Because they were related to each other to some degree, and that is why their families would not accept their marriage, and that is why they decided to flee to India.
Having never taken such a journey before, they said all they knew was to keep walking south, away from their homes and families. Their statements to the police describe long hazardous walks across the marshy salt desert to reach Kutch.
So it's interesting, while the second couple, Popat and Gauri, they come from Mungaria village, which is about 5 kilometers from the India-Pakistan border. It is the second last village. And just as they crossed the border into India, they were apprehended by the border security force. However, the first couple reached very far into Indian territory. Toto and Meena are from Lasri village, which is just about 2 kilometers from the border. And the police said they can actually, using the phone camera, they can see the village and the people over there. Right, it's that close to the border. And people from the village, they are from the shepherding communities. They come and graze their animals very near to the border. So these people left on October 4th from their village. It was a full moon night. And they aimed for this geographical structure indicator. It's called the Merudo Dungar. Okay, so it's a hillock on the Indian side, and on a clear day you can see it very clearly from the border. So they followed this hillock, they crossed the border, they swam in the Rann of Kutch lake, which is marshland, and they swam with water reaching up from their waist to their necks also in some places. And they reached Merudo Dungar, and on the second day they reached another geographical structure that is on the island of Khadir Bet. So that's how they crossed 50 kilometers walking and swimming. They ate wild berries and filled fresh water from the pools of water filled due to the rains. And that is how they reached the village of Ratanpur on Khadir Island, which is in the Rann of Kutch Lake. And that is where they were found by local villagers, who then handed them over to the police.
Now, the authorities say that the timing and proximity of these crossings have raised red flags. Within a span of weeks, two couples from neighboring Pakistani villages belonging to the same tribal community turning up in the same stretch of Kutch, both claiming to have walked across the border solely for love. all of this appears suspicious to officials.
It is quite unusual, especially for those from border villages to cross over, and for this reason particularly. Most of the people that are in the joint interrogation center here are fishermen who have been caught in Indian waters, just like Indian fishermen get caught by Pakistani forces. So it is quite unusual for people, especially couples, to cross like this way. And now 2 cases have happened within the span of 1.5 months. So it is very unusual.
And Brendan, we know that both couples belong to the Bhil tribal community. So could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. So both these couples, one is from Lasri village and the other is from Mungaria village. Both are on the border with Gujarat, and both are predominantly Bhil communities, which are indigenous tribals. And these people have very close-knit families, and they live in very, very small villages. So they are more like hamlets than actual villages. For example, Lasri village is a hamlet of just about 25 to 30 houses, it appears. And there's a temple there. So it's just that much. So you can see the level of relationship that each one has with each other, especially genetic relationship. That is why everyone is very close to each other. And perhaps that is why they don't allow marriages within the same village.
And Brendan, you highlight that the Gujarat police worry that 2 couples arriving so close together from the same tehsil may not actually be a coincidence. So, what are the officials focusing on during their investigation?
Right. So, primarily, it appears that the second couple, that is Popat and Gauri from Mungaria village, they may have heard or seen reports that Toto and Meena from Lasri had crossed over to India to get married. And maybe that is why they too crossed the Indian border from their village. But however, investigations are still underway. Multiple national security, national intelligence officials are currently interrogating both the couples to see whether there is any nefarious motive or not. Till now, no such public information has come to light that they had any nefarious motives. Plus, neither of them were carrying any devices or weapons or any such objects with them. They just came with the clothes on their back. So that remains a matter of investigation.
And what's interesting is that the couple claimed to be minors, but tests showed otherwise, right? So talk about how doctors determined their age.
So it's just the first couple, Toto and Meena, they claim to be minors. So the second couple said they are in their early 20s, but the first couple said that they were minors. Now, we don't know why they claimed to be minors, or whether they thought that they would receive special treatment because they are minors, or they don't know their age, because they had no documentation at the time of being apprehended by the police. And since these are border villages, it could be possible that there is no proper infrastructure on the Pakistani side to register their births and deaths. But since we don't know that, so the police decided to carry out a medical age estimation test, which is a series of tests conducted to check the legal age of a person through medical means. It happens in 2 processes. One is the bone ossification test and the other is the dental age estimation test. So basically it's dental mineralization. That's what they check. So these 2 tests were carried out on Toto and Meena, and instead of finding them 16 and 15 years old respectively, the test found them to be 20 and 19 years old respectively. And that is why they were deemed to be adults. Subsequently, they were booked in an FIR under the Passport Act and the Foreigners Act for illegally being on Indian soil.
And another thing that you highlight is that it was actually the local communities that informed the Sarpanch about them.
Yes. So border communities are very sensitized and very aware of the dangers of living on the international border, especially an unstable border like the India-Pakistan one. And they are very wary of infiltrators. They are very wary of strangers. In spite of so many tourists also going to that area because of the white sands and so on, they are very wary of outsiders and immediately inform the police if there is any outsider who is behaving suspiciously. And the police obviously check these people out, before taking it easy. Yeah. So everyone is very careful in these border villages. So that is how they were apprehended.
And of course, the authorities are still trying to find out whether something more might be at play here. But what are some of the next steps they will be taking? Like, could these couples be granted asylum, or is deportation the most likely outcome?
We don't know the nitty-gritty of that at the moment, but legal method is currently since they already have an affair against them and they have crossed the border illegally a year without a passport, they have no documentation, they are in violation of Indian law. Now, obviously, they will be produced in court and a trial will take place on whether the charges against them stand or not. If the charges against them stand, then they will be sentenced to prison. And after their prison term is completed, they will be deported back to Pakistan. This is the situation as it stands in law.
And in the end, we turn our attention to 5 workers from Jharkhand who are set to return home after being stranded in Cameroon. The men, all from Hazaribagh and Girid districts, had travelled to Africa earlier this year for construction work, but later alleged that they were denied their promised wages and were forced to live in poor conditions. As reported by the Indian Express's Shubham Tiga, the workers were recruited through a local contractor who promised them employment with a company in Cameroon. However, upon arrival, they learned they were instead working under a subcontractor. According to one of them, Sunil Mahato, from Hazaribagh's Unchagana village, the group left for Cameroon on 30th of March and received wages only for the first 3 months. And that too, only about 25,000 rupees per month, which is lower than the $400 which were promised to them. Mahato said the contractor repeatedly delayed their payments, citing that main company had not paid him. After months of non-payment, the workers stopped working and arranged their own tickets to return. He added that whatever little was due, they cleared in parts, adding that they had been struggling for food and basic supplies before deciding to leave. Tiga notes that another worker, Chandrasekhar Mahato from Girid, said he and his father, Dilo Mahato, were among those stranded. Chandrasekhar, who had earlier worked in Mumbai, said that at no point, either in Jharkhand, during transit in Delhi, or on arrival in Cameroon, were they given copies of their employment agreements. He said the subcontractor had ignored them for 5 months after they began asking for pending wages. The men eventually sent videos from Cameroon appealing to both the central and state governments for rescue assistance. Jharkhand-based social activist Sikandar Ali, who works for migrant labour issues, said the workers contacted him first. He forwarded their video appeal to the Labour Department. Tiga further reports that Shikha Lakra, head of the State Migrant Worker Control Room, said her office coordinated with the contractor and the company to secure their release and repatriation. Lakra also said that the company has now booked the tickets using money given by the workers themselves. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank, Bhargava and me, Ichha Sharma. If you like the show, do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. You can also recommend it to someone you think may like it, with a friend or in your family. This is the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcast or write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.